The studio audience buzzed with excitement as the stage lights dimmed and the announcer introduced the night's guest. "Please welcome Chris Stapleton." The crowd erupted in applause as the country superstar walked out from behind the curtain, his signature cowboy hat casting a shadow over his eyes. With a modest smile and a tip of his hat, he made his way to the chair across from Jimmy Kimmel, who stood to greet him with a wide grin. "Chris Stapleton, everybody," Jimmy announced with his usual flair. As Chris settled into his chair, the contrast between the two men was immediate. There was Jimmy, the quick-witted, sharp-tongued late-night host known for his satire, and then there was Chris, the grounded, soft-spoken musician whose soulful voice had become a staple in American music. The conversation started easily. Jimmy joked about Chris's long beard, asking if it had ever been mistaken for a bird's nest, or if small animals ever tried to crawl into it. Chris chuckled, his deep, rumbling voice filling the room with warmth. The audience laughed, enjoying the friendly banter. Jimmy then shifted to music, asking about Chris's latest album and his upcoming tour. The energy was light and easy until Jimmy steered the interview into more serious waters. "You know, Chris," Jimmy began, his grin fading into a more probing expression, "a lot of artists these days are using their platforms to talk about political issues. Do you ever feel like, as someone with such a massive fan base, you have a responsibility to take a stand on the big things going on in the country right now?" Chris straightened slightly in his chair, his fingers brushing his beard as he considered the question. He had always avoided politics in interviews, believing his job was to make music that brought people together, not drive them apart. "Well, Jimmy," he answered slowly, "I think music is about connecting people, no matter where they're from or what they believe. I don't want to tell folks how to think. I just want to give them songs they can hold on to." It was a thoughtful, measured response that earned a round of applause from the crowd. But Jimmy wasn't satisfied. Leaning forward, he smirked in the way he often did before a sharper question. "But don't you think staying neutral is just another way of taking a side?" A low murmur rippled through the audience, sensing the rising tension. Chris's eyes, partially hidden beneath his hat, narrowed slightly. He had been through tough interviews before, but there was something in Jimmy's persistence that felt less like curiosity and more like a trap. "Jimmy," Chris said firmly, though still calm, "I didn't come here to talk politics. I came here to talk about music. That's where my heart is, and that's what my fans connect with me for. Not for speeches, not for sides, just the songs." The audience erupted in applause, whistling and cheering, clearly siding with Chris. Jimmy, however, chuckled awkwardly and pressed on. "Come on, Chris. You're one of the most influential artists out there. People look up to you. Don't you think they deserve to know what you really think?" This time, the applause faded into a heavy silence. Chris's jaw tightened, his patience thinning. He leaned forward slightly, his voice steady but with a new edge. "My fans know exactly where I stand, Jimmy. I stand with the music. I stand with the people who come out, night after night, singing with me until their voices give out. That's the truth, and it's more than enough." The crowd exploded into thunderous applause, many rising to their feet. Chris's words cut through the tension with raw authenticity, and the audience loved it. But Jimmy, perhaps feeling cornered on his own stage, smirked dismissively, trying to wave it off with a sarcastic quip. Chris didn't laugh. Instead, his expression hardened. He sat back, shook his head, and with deliberate calm, began to rise from his chair. The audience gasped, the studio suddenly alive with anticipation. Chris tipped his hat to the crowd, acknowledging their support before turning his back to the host. Without another word, he walked steadily toward the curtain, his boots echoing against the stage floor. The audience erupted, cheering his name, chanting, "Chris! Chris! Chris!" As he disappeared backstage, Jimmy sat frozen in his chair, speechless for once, caught off guard by the sheer finality of what had just unfolded. Chris Stapleton had walked off the stage, not in anger, but with the quiet strength of a man who refused to compromise his principles. The air in the studio was charged with shock as Jimmy Kimmel sat frozen, blinking rapidly, while the cheers and chants for Chris echoed across the room. "Chris! Chris! Chris!" the audience roared, their loyalty to the country singer loud and unwavering. The cameras, unsure where to focus, caught Jimmy fumbling with his cue cards, his usual wit swallowed by the gravity of the live television moment. Attempting to recover, Jimmy forced a strange chuckle. "Well, that was Chris Stapleton, everybody. Guess he had another gig to get to." The audience didn't laugh. Murmurs rolled through the crowd, a wave of palpable tension. The rare silence of a late-night audience unwilling to side with its host left Jimmy rattled. Backstage, the mood was different. Chris walked with steady steps, his boots clicking against the polished floor as producers and assistants rushed after him. "Chris, please just give Jimmy a moment to explain. Maybe we can smooth this over," one of them pleaded. Chris stopped, turned, and looked at the young producer with eyes that were sharp, yet calm. "I've already said all I need to say," he replied, his deep voice steady. "Music is my answer to everything he was fishing for. I'm not about to start giving speeches because someone wants a headline." With that, he disappeared into his dressing room, leaving the crew scrambling to figure out how to contain the fallout. Meanwhile, the internet had already exploded. Within minutes, clips of Chris walking out circulated across Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. The hashtags Cheer Chris Stapleton, Cheer Walk Off, and Cheer Respect the Music trended worldwide. Fans flooded social media with praise for his calm dignity, declaring him a class act for refusing to be cornered into a political debate. "This is why we love him," one fan wrote. "Chris speaks through his songs, not sound bites. He doesn't need to prove anything to anyone." Another comment read, "Jimmy tried to drag him into nonsense, and Chris just walked away like a boss." News outlets quickly picked up the story. The next morning, headlines screamed across websites. Chris Stapleton walks off live interview after clash with Jimmy Kimmel, and country star chooses music over politics in viral moment. Some critics framed it as Chris dodging tough questions, while others applauded him for holding his ground. Back in the studio, Jimmy tried to lighten the mood for the rest of the show. But something was different. The audience's energy never fully returned, and each joke seemed to fall flatter than the last. The tension lingered, unshakable. Jimmy knew that the only thing anyone would remember was Chris Stapleton's walk-off. Later that night, Chris broke his silence with a single powerful post on his social media accounts. "I make music for the people. That's my line, and that's where I'll always stand. Thank you to everyone who understands." The post went viral, amassing millions of likes and shares within hours. The following evening, Jimmy Kimmel addressed the incident directly at the start of his show. His tone was lighter, but it carried a hint of humility rarely seen from the late-night host. "So, about last night," he began, drawing a laugh from the audience. "Chris Stapleton walked out on me. And honestly, I can't blame him. He's one of the greatest voices in music. And maybe I pushed too hard, trying to get him to say something he didn't want to. I respect him. Even if he walked away, I still love his music." The audience chuckled, but even they could sense that Jimmy was trying to soften the blow of a rare misstep. The narrative had already been written. Chris wasn't painted as an artist avoiding responsibility. He was celebrated as a man who knew who he was and refused to compromise. His decision to walk away rather than get pulled into a spectacle only deepened his reputation as an artist of integrity. Fans admired his quiet strength, noting that sometimes the most powerful message is not shouted, but delivered in silence, and with dignity. Over the next few weeks, the story became a cultural talking point. Late-night pundits debated whether artists should use their platforms for politics, or if Chris had set an example by refusing to let his artistry be politicized. Radio shows replayed the clip, and country stations championed Chris's music as a reminder of his core values. At his next concert, fans held up signs reading, "We stand with Chris," and "Music First." They chanted his name louder than ever before. Through it all, Chris Stapleton remained steady, continuing to do what he did best, writing songs that spoke to the human soul, not to headlines. For millions, his walk-off was not seen as an exit, but as a statement, a reminder that true strength doesn't always come from confrontation. Sometimes, it comes from the simple act of walking away with your values intact. Chris hadn't just left Jimmy Kimmel's stage. He had walked into history as an artist who proved that music, when kept pure, was powerful enough to speak louder than any debate.